excited! My Natasha Denona Retro Glam just came to me in the mail. I actually posted a video about all the promos and the looks that Natasha Denona created yesterday, and I told you I ordered this from the Natasha Denona website, and I was kind of mad at myself for doing that because it did launch at Sephora yesterday, so I could have gotten the discount for the sale, but I am no longer mad at myself because in terms of work, I'm very happy that FedEx delivered this literally next day shipping. So I'm happy that I finally have it on my hands to play with. So I've built up the anticipation for this palette, have I not? I've already filmed 2 videos talking about this palette without even having it. This is the video, friends, where I do have the palette. So let's go ahead and talk about it. You can order it right now on Sephora, Natasha Denona. It should be coming to Beautylish as well. It's $69, meaning that is her mini palette, and it's her holiday palette. So let's go ahead and get into it. Here is the box that it's going to come in. It's very, very cute. I really like it. I love how they do this design for the retro. And then here's all the details if you need. This palette is made in Italy, and if you need, there are ingredients for each and every shade on the bag, as all the details right here, as well as the names and formulas of each of the shades. Now, Retro Glam, this is a combination of the mini retro that everybody went crazy for when this color story came out. And also, it's taking the glam and glittery vibes from the Glam palette. I find it interesting because there is a whole retro palette, and she just totally did not mention it, even though the mini retro was the inspiration for this palette. It was not the inspiration here for this palette. So I'll show you the 2 together, but I feel like she made these 2 for each other, and then everybody was upset with this because this is what we wanted, because mini glam came before and we wanted the pinks and greens, so she finally expanded on the pinks and greens. So let's go ahead, get a closer look at the palette. And so what's different about this palette, first of all, it's definitely a little thicker if you compared it to the previous packaging, because it has this plexiglass over top. Now, what makes the plexiglass special is when you turn it like this, you get this really cool 3D effect. So I think that adds so much to the palette. I think it makes it cooler. I mean, is it necessary? Of course not. But I think it's fun. I think it makes it feel a little bit more expensive. And then, of course, Natasha Denona Retro Glam. With these palettes, there is holes so that you can pop a needle through and the shades will come out and you can mix and match, and then you have a little bit of the details down here. I love that it holds up on its own, so you can set it on a windowsill and do your makeup. You do have a nice sized mirror as well, making it better for travel. I mean, it's still big for travel, but it's a good mirror. And here is the palette in all of its glory. I will say in person, compared to the swatches, I know a lot of you guys like when I mention that, it looks a little bit deeper, which I think makes it look even prettier. In some photos, I feel like it looked a little bit more washed out. It does not look washed out in person, and the greens are really popping even more in person than they do online, which I think is better for those of you with a medium to deep complexion. So definitely better in person. And here are all of the shades. This palette has a few different formulas. Metallics, cream to powder, creamy mattes are going to be these 6 right here. This one is her glitter sparkle formulation, and those are all of the formulations that we have in this palette. And I think it's a nice even mix of mattes to shimmers. As I'm looking, right, the mattes are on the lighter side, and the shimmers, there's a lot of deeper shimmers. So I was worried about creating looks. I wasn't sure how these were going to translate on the eyelid, so we're going to have to see. But first, let's go ahead and swatch. So this shade right here, I actually misspoke. It's not just a metallic. This is a sparkling metallic. So this one has a little bit more oomph to it. Then we'll have Jazzy, which is a metallic, and then Oscar, and then Evergreen, the cream to powder. So Flare here is a sparkling metallic vintage rose with a silver shift. Jazzy is a metallic dark cool brown. Oscar is a metallic light medium vintage champagne. Very pretty. I feel like it has some green in there. And then Evergreen is a matte cream powder medium dark sage green. And if you're new here, when it comes to my swatches, I don't dig in the pan nearly as hard as Natasha does because I want to get a true feel for the formula, because you're not pressing hard in here when you apply these on the eyes either, so that's why I do it this way. Marlin is a metallic light medium sage green, absolutely gorgeous. Maxi is a metallic medium dark warm taupe, has a lot of gray in there. Sage is a matte medium sage green, very pretty. I don't have a lot of colors like this. And then Holly is a matte light neutral rose. Let's get into these next shades. Pay close attention to Flutter because this is the sparkling shade. So here's how they look on my fingers. Fringe right here is a matte pastel sage green. Faye is a matte medium muted clay. Flutter is a sparkling light champagne pink. Do we think that looks different than metallics? I would say it has less of a pigmented base and more strong sparkles that are going to reflect the light more. And then we have Lucy, which is a matte light limestone. And let's hop into the final 3 shades. Should look like this on the finger. Palladian is a metallic pastel sage green. Belle is a medium matte dusty rose. Looks like that. And then Oz is a metallic medium dark muted forest green. And here is the palette. I mean, it is those vintage pinks and greens that we wanted oh so bad from the mini retro. So I'm very excited that we have these. All 15 of these shades are brand new to the Natasha Denona line, meaning they do not exist. So that is also a bigger incentive to pick up if you are a Natasha Denona collector. And as you can see by the swatches, very consistent, very pigmented, not chalky or overly powdery. I'm really, really happy with the swatches, so I don't think there's any funny business going on in here. I think we're going to get very good Natasha Denona quality, but let's pop them in the eyes and see. So I'm going to do 2 looks because I really do want to play with this formula. We're going to do 2 looks today, and then I think some point this week I'm going to do another get ready with me using this palette again for like a third more pretty pulled together look, something that I would do more so, well, maybe not every day, but we're going to do a third look in a get ready with me after I've played with it some more to really kind of finalize my thoughts on this palette. So for primer on this eye for the first look, I just used the Jaclyn Cosmetics First Base Eyeshadow Primer. This is my favorite eyeshadow primer. And in yesterday's video, I was going through the different looks that Natasha created, and I felt really inspired by them. So there's one that I want to do that I'm feeling inspired by. So this is inspired by Natasha Denona's work herself. So what I'm going to do to start off is I'm going to take Lucy, and I have no clue if she used the shade in this particular look. I'm doing my own take for the review using different shades. So Lucy right here, I would say, and I washed this brush, is pulling a little deeper on the eyelid than I expected. And this looks very cool and gray. It has a little bit more of a green tone in pan. I'm just going to use this as our transition to start off. Okay, next up, what I need to do is play with Evergreen right here. This is the cream to powder formulation. And I'm going to circle this in the outer corner. So in the reference photo that I'm looking at, she definitely did not use this shade. But I need to play with this color to let you guys know, because it is one of the more unique formulas. And what I love about the cream to powder formulation is there is no fallout. Like typically with this type of shade, they'll turn out really powdery and make a mess, which is not what I want since I already have concealer on. You can see it's working out beautifully. Now the trade-off with this type of shade is you don't get immediate impact with color, but it does build up and it's mess-free. I think it's very beginner-friendly. I'm gonna take the first brush that I used with Lucy and blend it out, and it looks pretty good. I would say, I don't know if you're noticing this, a little bit of patchiness, right? It's a little uneven looking, but let's see if we can fix that. This brush is pretty stiff, so it might be the brush that's causing that. Maybe using a fluffier brush would negate that, because it's not like a unfixable patchy. I'm definitely able to fix it. I think it was just the tool that I was using. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, next up I'm going to use Jazzy right here. This is a metallic shade, but I am going to use it to add depth, because one thing that this palette lacks, unfortunately, is depth. So hopefully, despite this being metallic, it will be able to give us some depth. So you can see I'm creating a V in the outer corner. I'm using a Rephr number 13 brush. Yeah. She definitely used this shade in a lot of her looks that she created, because there's lots of grayish outer corners. So the metallics are working really nice in the outer corner, even if they're metallics. So don't be afraid. That's a very high quality shadow for you, if the metallics can work in the crease and be fine. So we're going to start off with that. I know it looks a little messy. It will come together, hopefully. I want to use some of Marlin in the center of the lid. So I'm going to pop this right here. Just a really beautiful metallic shade. So it's responding well to a finger. Let's see how it responds with a brush. Yep, and if you want more impact, wet your brush, and that will do it. Okay, I like that mint shade. And then we're gonna go into Palladian right here. And I'm gonna put this in the inner corner. So this has a subtle undertone of green, but is still quite bright. That it could pass as white, but it's really a great brightening shade for this palette with these colors. So I'm just popping this in the inner corner. I like how these are applying with a brush. And then I'm gonna go back into my small brush because I want to add more depth. This does not look like Natasha's look at all, by the way. I've been messing around with too many different colors. I want to bring that dark gray back. So blend that in. I'm going to use a smaller, clean brush to blend the edges out. Now, if you really want to soften the edges, let's go back into Lucy right here. Blend this out. And I want to use Palladian a little bit more spread out to brighten up the eye. I really like how this is coming together. It's not often you'll see me wearing kind of like a minty green look like this. I'm out of my comfort zone, but it's going to be very fun for the winter. I can't get over how good Jazzy, this metallic shade, is working, because sometimes with metallic shades, when you try to use them in this capacity, they'll have a bunch of fallout. Not this. I'm actually going to go ahead and just drag this along the outer third of my lower lash line as well while I have it on my brush. And then I'm going to kind of follow suit with what I did on top here. We're going into Marlin, which is a very stunning shade. I mean, looking at the palette, this one might be my favorite. I think it's the best representation of this palette, and it's just so pretty. I like how it's a minty shade, but it's not super obnoxious. There's something about it that is not neutral, but it's not crazy. Then I'm going to go ahead into Palladian, which I am loving as well. This is the perfect highlight shade for this palette. I was going to say this palette's well-rounded, but it really isn't because there aren't much depth shades. But that look is really pretty. Okay, one last thing, one last color to play with is going to be Flutter right here, which is the sparkling shade. So I'm going to use my finger, and I'm going to apply this to the inner third of the eyelid right on top of Palladian so that you can see the sparkles here and what this adds to the look. That's kind of like the cherry on top here. I really like this shade as well. I think the quality is really nice, and it adds that special effect that you get from the Glam palette. This shade is definitely inspired by the Glam palette, and that just added that final zhuzh. So we got this really cool icy look. Now I want to do a look that's a little bit more pink and green. So what I'm gonna do is start off with some of Fringe right here, which we have not yet used. And I do have my Jaclyn Cosmetics base already down. And this is going to start us off in the inner corner of the crease, like so. Pretty good pigment, all things considered, for it being icier looking in the pan. I feel like these colors are pooling really well on my skin tone. Now, I can't speak on somebody who has a deeper skin tone, but one of you guys made a great point in my last video that her demos are actually all on mostly medium to deep complexion, and these actually look really good because they're popping against the skin tone, whereas if you're very, very fair, this might really wash you out. Maybe. I think this is more versatile than we think it's gonna be, but again, I'm gonna have to watch some reviews as well. Next, we're going into Holly right here, and we're gonna start that pink transition. So I'm just gonna put Holly in the outer half of the crease, kind of winging it out. We are gonna define with a different shade to get a little bit more depth here. So this shade's pretty light. It is lighter than Fringe, but I'm noticing that it's building up really nice. This look in particular is a true test to really see if you can combine the two different color stories here, or if it's better off just kind of leaving them and doing a greenish eye and a pinky eye look. So just like that. And then to deepen, I'm going into Belle right here, which you can see is a little bit more of a rosy shade. And this one is going in the outer corner, and then I'm gonna start blending it a little bit higher. Then I'm also gonna use this to wing it out as well. So I don't know if you can see, but we are getting a little bit of kickback with the matte shades, but little to no fallout with application. Now I use a light hand, and I tap with my brush. I do the responsible thing, but really nice. It's not too messy at all. I have a little bit of Holly on here just to blend this out. It's kind of neat. I'm gonna go ahead and use Belle in the outer corner right here. And then I'm going to go into Fringe. Kind of got cotton candy vibes going on here. BK Beauty 209, and we're gonna go into Flare, which is the sparkling metallic shade. And I'm gonna apply this to the outer corner of the eye. Natasha has a look on her website that's pretty similar. This Flare shade was the star of that. So I'm just applying this here with a brush. Let's see if we can build it up with a finger. Yeah, it definitely is more of a ba-boom when you use that finger, right? I want to play with a little bit of Oscar next, which is a little bit more grayy. And I'm putting that right next to Flare, right here. Actually, that goes surprisingly well. I was worried it would look misplaced here. That actually is pretty right there. It looks a little deeper in the pan than it pulls on the eyelid. I'm gonna go ahead and apply that to the center of the lower lash line as well to add some brightness. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is not my favorite look. But it's different, that's for certain. And then in the inner corner, this shade, I'm telling you, is gonna be so useful for this palette. Palladian. Once again, just makes sense that this is here. Okay, and then I do want to take, I'm wiping off this brush, a little bit of flare to kind of sharpen the pink out here, right, to create more of that contrast. The one thing with the sparkling metallic is the shimmering shades, or the shimmering particles, are kind of sitting on top of the eyelid a little bit, so that means it's going to be messy with some fallout. So I'm going to take a clean brush and just kind of wipe away the fallout. And I do want to add some depth to the look, just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and pop on over back into, I don't know, do I want to do evergreen or jazzy? Is going to be a little bit, no, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take an angled brush and we're going to go into evergreen. I've already used this shade, but I want to try it as a liner. This might be a fail, so bear with me. It's not doing bad. It's actually covering the shimmer, because I was worried, you know, with flare, this might not look great because it's a metallic, so the matte might be fighting to show up. But it's doing really good, and I didn't even need to wet the brush. If you do want it more impactful, use a mixing medium or some water. But that's not bad. I'm very happy. That was a true test with this shade. I'm gonna say it did a good job. Oh, I did not mean to get that. Then let's go ahead and put that right in the outer corner of the lower lash line also, just to carry that green down. Ooh, honestly, I feel like that pulled this look together. I actually really like that. Okay, so the only shades that I haven't played with in this palette are Maxi, Sage, Faye, and Oz. I've used all of the others, so I might have to pull those colors out again and play with those very soon. But I'm gonna pop on some liner and lashes so you can see the final looks that we created. Alright, so here are the two looks with liner and lashes. They both are very, very pretty with the lashes. I am feeling this one because it's a little bit more cohesive color story-wise, but surprisingly, this one pulled together. I was honestly shocked. I told you, I've mentioned this numerous times, I didn't think I'd be able to be very creative with this palette. While visually, I love the way this palette looks. I love the color story. On the eyes, I just don't think I'm creative enough to visualize and create really pretty looks. And I mean, this one is pretty. I don't love it, but I think it's nice. But I can definitely see people who are not as comfortable with color having some limitations. However, quality. I mean, if you're not concerned with the color story at all, the quality on here is spot on. My tip for you, if you are unsure of color curations, one, go on the Natasha Denona website or her YouTube channel. She'll show you some looks that she creates. I was inspired by her look for this look right here. Or play it cool, and you know, if you want a cool tone look, mix these four colors together. You can always just create a really simple green look with all the options that she gives you. You can always stick with the pinks right here. So you can go monochromatic, that's always safe. But in terms of mixing the greens and the pinks, I mean, she put these colors together in a way that they don't look bad together, but it is not intuitive. You know what I mean? But anyways, before I get into my final thoughts on this palette, yes, we have comparisons. Let's just go ahead and get into it. So as you know, the Retro Glam palette pretty much is based off the color story from the Mini Glam. So I wanted to show you them next to each other. You can absolutely see that this came from this color story. So I did swatch by swatch comparisons for you. Top row is obviously Retro Glam. The bottom row are all 5 shades from the mini Retro, and there are no close colors at all, but you can see they're related. I think that's very cool that it really is not dupable at all. And then, of course, you know I had to pull out Glam versus Retro Glam because I can see somewhat of the inspiration with the cool tones, but that's about it, and maybe like the glimmeriness. So I did get all the cool tones from the Glam palette at the bottom and compared them to the cool tones from the Retro Glam, and there's similarities for sure. So this kind of proves the inspiration of the Glam palette here, which I think is kind of cool because I love the Glam palette so much. Here is the Retro Glam versus the Retro palette, and honestly not really comparable at all. Maybe like 1 or 2 shades, but I find both of these palettes to be very different from one another. And the pastel palette. So while none of these shades really are worth comparing, I will say these look like they're family members, no? Like, the pastel palette is definitely the crazy younger sister, and Retro Glam is definitely more cool as a cucumber, you know? So if you liked the vibes of the pastel, I honestly think you'll really like the Retro Glam. I can't speak. The Retro Glam. I actually had a lot of fun with the pastel, but it's a lot brighter for sure. And again, hardly any shades worth swatch comparing to. The vibes of Nouveau remind me a lot of Retro Glam, and you guys know I've been loving Nouveau. They're the same kind of like, I don't even know, it's just a similar vibe, but all different colors. So if you have the Nouveau and you love it, I think you'll like the Retro Glam as well, but not really swatch by swatch comparable, but same vibe for sure. And now it is time for the most requested comparison, the Lime Crime Venus XL2. Now this palette is so unique, or was so unique, because there really were not any palettes out like this one, okay? And then Retro Glam came around. Hold on. It has that green and vintage rose color story as well. I thought for sure that these would be pretty close dupes, but honestly, they aren't really. While they do have the vintage pink and green effect to them, the Lime Crime is more earthy and has more warm tones, whereas the Natasha Denona has those cool tones that Lime Crime doesn't have at all. I didn't have any gray toned colors in the Lime Crime. The Lime Crime is warmer. So on the top, Natasha Denona. On the bottom, what I could find from the Lime Crime. And you can see the colors of the Lime Crime just aren't as vibrant, and they're more earthy toned. They really, I find, to be quite different. Now, I'm sure you can get the look with the Lime Crime, but swatch by swatch, I was pretty unsuccessful. All right, guys, so final thoughts. In terms of somebody who has a very large makeup collection, this palette color story-wise, very, very unique. So I don't have another palette really like this. The closest that I had was the Lime Crime, and they really aren't even that close. So I have like 500 palettes, so that's saying a lot. But if you don't want to pick this up, I know Sydney Grace is also bundling the Glam palette that Mel curated, so that one I know a lot of you are getting over this one as well, so that's another option. But overall, this palette itself, really gorgeous, really great quality. For me, it's not the most intuitive. It's not the palette from Natasha Denona that I'm gonna reach for the most on an everyday basis, as far as I can tell now. I have no complaints about the quality, and I think it's fun. It's causing me to step outside of my comfort zone, honestly, because even though I'm complaining like, oh, I don't know about grading looks, Natasha put these colors in here, and it was very intentional, and the shades go better with each other than you actually think that they would. So maybe, you know, I can wear this whenever I just want to step outside my comfort zone and try out something new, try out a new color combo. I will be continuing to create different looks with these. I'll try and post them on my Instagram, and I will come out with a video later this week or probably early into next week creating another look with this. But overall, if you like the color story, it is very, very unique. I'm confirming that now with what I showed you. And the quality is really nice. It's just a matter of if you think you need it or not. I think it could use some more depth personally, but you know, on somebody with a medium to deeper complexion, that actually might be very nice because this will pop against your skin tone and look really, really nice. And maybe, you know, if you're more on the fair side, I'm curious, do these wash you out? Let me know. So overall, successful palette. Very pretty. I'm very happy with it, and it's pretty much all I wanted out of the original mini Glam. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye guys, have a good one.